Canada and the United States are back in a trade war. 50% tariffs are hitting billions of dollars in Canadian exports, and Canadian businesses are suddenly being forced to rethink where they sell, what they charge, and in some cases, whether they can keep selling into the US at all. But I think there's a much bigger business lesson here, and it has almost nothing to do with tariffs. If your business depends too heavily on one country, one customer, Google, Facebook, YouTube, or any platform you don't control, you have the same fundamental problem. Someone else can change the rules, and your business has to live with the consequences. I've been building websites and working with businesses online for more than 20 years, and I've watched this happen over and over again. Businesses find something that works. Google sends them traffic. Facebook sends them leads. One big client keeps the company busy. Maybe most of their customers come from one geographic market, and because it's working, nobody thinks very much about the risk. Until it stops working. That's when diversification suddenly becomes important. Look at what's happening between Canada and the United States. Canadian businesses didn't wake up one morning and suddenly become worse businesses. Their products didn't suddenly become worse. Their employees didn't suddenly become less productive. The rules around them changed. That's an important distinction. Because business owners tend to think about risk as something happening inside their business. Am I charging enough? Are my expenses too high? Do I need more employees? Is my marketing working? Those are important questions. But some of the biggest threats to your business can come from decisions you have absolutely no control over. And digital marketing works exactly the same way. I've worked in web design and digital marketing long enough to remember when businesses could build a website, optimize it for Google, rank well, and receive traffic for years. That still happens. But the environment is completely different now. Google changes its search results. AI answers questions without necessarily sending someone to your website. Social platforms change their algorithms. Advertising costs change. YouTube changes its policies. None of that requires your permission. And that's why I think there's a dangerous piece of advice in digital marketing. Find what works and double down. Sometimes that's exactly what you should do, but there's a difference between doubling down on something that's working and becoming dependent on it. If 80% of your leads come from Google, that's fantastic, until Google stops sending them. If almost all your sales come through Instagram, that's fantastic, until your reach disappears. And if one customer represents half your revenue, that's fantastic, until that customer leaves. Success can actually hide concentration risk. So here's something I genuinely like business owners watching this to think about. If your number one source of customers disappeared tomorrow, what would happen? Not eventually. Tomorrow. Would people still know how to find you? Would you have another way to reach previous customers? Would another source of leads already exist? Or would you basically be starting over? I think the answer tells you far more about the strength of your marketing than your current traffic numbers do. But here's where I think this gets even more interesting. The solution isn't simply to be everywhere. That's another piece of marketing advice I don't particularly agree with. A small business doesn't need TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Google Ads, email marketing, and 6 other things running at the same time. You can spread yourself so thin that none of them work. The goal isn't to be everywhere. The goal is to make sure no single gatekeeper can shut off your entire customer pipeline. That's a very different strategy. But before we continue, a quick note. If you want help building a website and digital marketing strategy around your business, visit fabiopeters.com. You can book a strategy session or website audit with me there. You can also find the relevant links in the description. And if you're finding this useful, I'd appreciate you subscribing to the channel. Now, back to the video. This is also why I've become increasingly interested in the idea of businesses owning their digital assets. And yes, I'm a web designer, so obviously I believe websites matter. But I'm not saying your website magically solves everything. It doesn't. A website with no traffic isn't much of an asset. What matters is what you build around it. Your website, your content, your customer relationships, your reputation, your email list, your brand searches, the people who know your name and deliberately look for you. Those things give you options. Think about a YouTube video, for example. YouTube might give that video 50 views. That's disappointing. But I can take that same idea and put it on my website. I can turn it into an article. I can send it to people who already know my business. It might eventually appear in Google. It might appear in an AI search result. I can reference it in another video 6 months from now. The content doesn't have to live and die based on whether one algorithm decided to distribute it this week. That's a completely different way of thinking about digital marketing. And this may be the biggest lesson of all. Businesses often confuse access with ownership. Having 10,000 followers doesn't mean you own an audience. You have access to an audience through somebody else's platform. Ranking number 1 on Google doesn't mean you own that traffic. Google is choosing to send it to you. Having a successful Amazon store doesn't mean you own the marketplace. Having a popular YouTube channel doesn't mean you control YouTube. These platforms can be incredibly valuable. I use them too. The mistake is believing that because something is working today, it belongs to you. It doesn't. And that's what makes the Canada-US situation such an interesting business lesson. Canada and the United States have one of the most integrated trading relationships in the world. For decades, proximity and access to the enormous American market have been major advantages for Canadian businesses. But dependence creates leverage. When the rules change, suddenly everybody starts talking about finding new markets, selling elsewhere, buying Canadian, building relationships with other countries, reducing exposure. Notice when those conversations become urgent, after the risk becomes obvious. Businesses do exactly the same thing with marketing. They start building an email list after social reach collapses. They start thinking about SEO after advertising becomes too expensive. They start making content after leads slow down. They start looking for new customers after losing their biggest account. That's backwards. So maybe diversification isn't something you do because your marketing isn't working. Maybe you do it precisely because it is working. That's when you have the breathing room to build the second source of customers. And then the third, you don't diversify because Google is useless. You diversify because Google can be incredibly valuable, and you don't want to lose your business if something changes. You don't abandon social media. You use social media to introduce people to a business that exists beyond social media. You don't stop using YouTube. You use YouTube to build recognition, expertise, and relationships that hopefully survive beyond an individual video. That's the difference between using platforms and building your business on top of them. So here's what I would do this week. Look at where your customers actually came from over the last 12 months, not where you think they came from. Look at the numbers. Google, referrals, social media, advertising, YouTube, repeat customers, one major client, one geographic market. Then ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Which one of these would hurt me the most if it disappeared? Don't immediately replace it. Don't panic. Don't abandon something that's working. Start building the alternative while you still have the luxury of time. Because the best time to reduce dependency isn't after somebody changes the rules. It's before they change the rules. Whatever happens next between Canada and the United States, I think there's a lesson here that goes well beyond trade. You cannot control every government decision. You cannot control Google's next update. You cannot control Facebook's algorithm. And you definitely can't control what YouTube decides to recommend tomorrow. But you can control how dependent your business becomes on any one of them. And I'd be interested to know where you see the biggest dependency in your own business right now. Is it Google, social media, one major customer, the US market, or something completely different? So, maybe the goal isn't to predict what Google, YouTube, governments, or markets will do next. Maybe the goal is to build a business strong enough that you don't have to.